Dr. Reddy, good evening. This is Krishna. I've tried to switch on my video too. This is a wonderful, insightful session which you are doing. I have a thought here. The persuasion strategies you are saying could be monetary, could be reciprocity. Could we look at this a little bigger in nature? A startup ecosystem features startups, investors, as you say, proximate connections to startups, proximate connections to investors. I'll take two examples, and this because this is all about human behavior, has very deep connection to organizational behavior. Let's take some philosophical examples. Let me take the African example of Ubuntu. Ubuntu basically dwells on the fact that I exist because of you. The Indian philosophy says, Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha. Let every being in this planet be satisfied, be happy, be successful. Now let's put that back in the startup ecosystem space. Investor has funds and is looking for returns and is obviously looking for better startups in which the returns can be maximized. Of course, it's going to be a basket of startups. Some might get 8x returns, some might just go bust. Uh, so investor will always look for quality startups where he can put the bet on. Startups, as you rightly said, are very great in ideas, risk taking, but they lack that financial capital. Now let's take two proximate connections. One is approximate to startup, and another is approximate to investor. If I know this is a very utopian, idealistic thought, if the proximate one to the investor understands his proximity to the investor and his standing with the investor will improve if he brings quality startups. On the other hand, a proximate connection to a startup, while they are extremely motivated, they believe in their idea, they believe in their story, they don't have the right connection to the investor. If these people start understanding and start feeling that this is a value chain, everybody is there to contribute their equal pieces and everybody possibly has an opportunity to gain. If the proximate connections, if the stakeholders believe that in your success my success lies and my in my success somebody else's success lies. I know this is, I don't want to turn this into a philosophical discussion, but would you concur with that thought?
Yeah, so again, thank you for the African perspective. It's new to me. I'm very narrowly educated in small business, so it's good to know. Obviously, the Indian perspective, it's preached to us since children, right? So I guess uh, uh, the way to think about these kinds of things is networks and networking interplay two things, right? One is relationships, where a lot of soft, effective things happen, and you are trying to raise money, and there's a market that comes into these relationships, right? So now, are you viewing this as a, and once you view this as a non-fungible resource, right? What do I mean by non-fungible, right? There's only limited attention of time for the investors. There's only limited capital. There's only limited amount of time for the entrepreneur and the limited amount of this, right? So we can't, it's not a fungible resource that we can let everything bloom because of the tight. So when I went to Babson, my professor there, I had a small scholarship to work as a research fellow, was Bill Brike. When he studied venture capital industry, is one of the pioneers he studied. And he said the biggest constraint of venture capitalists is their time. They can raise money, right? But time is their biggest constraint, and value, and then they're swarmed by hundreds and hundreds of emails, right? So in that way, you think about time being quite constrained. And the next step from the investor, right? They are busy, important people, otherwise they won't be in the venture capitalist contact network. Their time is also heavily constrained. So they are, as you mentioned, evaluating, should I take this forward or not, right? Because they don't want to take bad things to the venture capitalists all the time and then drop down, right? So it's an agentic decision. They're not doing, we expect some screening to happen because it's their credibility. If you walk something, you are walking this to the venture capitalist. Essentially, you're taking the entrepreneur and say, "Hey, come on, speak to this entrepreneur." Right. So that way, there is a lot of agentic actions happening there. Whereas around the entrepreneur, the people who advise them, who are in their professional network, we're talking about the professional. They could be family members as well. Entrepreneurship has lots of family helping them. The professional network who entrepreneurs turn to advice, who entrepreneurs to turn to feedback or other resources, they have some constraints, but they have an ongoing relationship. They're more likely to act. But the question is the distance. Yeah, it's the distance. Knowing the distance, will this entrepreneurs will the close contact act at all, right? Because they might view that, oh, this is a bridge too far, which is one of the points you right. So it might be, even though they're willing to act, they would do the same calculus as you said, and they might not even act, right? Because they would think that this is a bridge too far. We don't know any connections, right? But at least they will try to act, because if you're my friend Krishna, I ask you, hey, can you put a word or reach out to somebody who can put a word? You might think Reddi is nagging me, but if I don't, I'll see Reddi again tomorrow. He'll pester me again. So let me do something, anything, right?
Yeah.
So they may act, but how much convection, how much this, right? But frequency of this, right? Yeah. So
Thank you.
To sort of summarize, I think the points you mentioned, I think it's more likely. That's why we say the investor-centric context, conditional on them accepting, more likely to have a successful product, right? Yeah, I see a hand from Sundara, and then I see a comment as well. Sundara?
Yep. So Reddi, very nice talk, and I'm warming up to this. I have two questions, one more like a comment, another is a question. See, you have investment bankers, right? Agencies who do this for a professional living, right? So that's something to consider in this. So the monetary incentives that you talked about directly applies to them, and they do that for a living. So number one, that's one comment I wanted to do. And second, I wanted to ask you, in what way is this different or contextually different from enterprise and government sales? Because if I'm going to sell products and services to enterprises and government, I need to do the same thing. So, but it's a different class of recipient on the other side. The motivations are different. I realize those, but isn't this theory broadly applicable to that as well?
Yeah. Okay. And Dipendo also sort of highlights the same points in the chat. Dipendo, so let me take some Sundara's and yours together. Yes. Usually in investment banks, especially for well-established SMEs and large clients, have a process where they get the order book, fulfill their order book, and go shop around this and get raise debt, raise equity, right? That's what investment banks do all the time. But investment banks can't deal with startups because they don't have capabilities to evaluate startups, and there are hundreds of startups with only an idea, right? So this system doesn't work. Yes, there are brokers for startups too, but this broker system is not so well established, right? And it's not as a mainstream thing. But the fact that the brokers exist also says we should consider monetary incentives, right? Because there are some brokers who are doing this for monetary risk. So why don't we try directly offering monetary to the contact and see if this comes up? So yes, you are right. This kind of brokering service does not happen as much in the entrepreneurial space, but at least there is a reason to expect that monetary incentives will not be rejected offhand or might be an upfront to people if it is to be anticipated. Some expectation that this happens. Right? Thank you for that, Sundar. And I see a comment. Yeah, the platforms also take a fixed fee and then try to organize this to this. Haritha, you are also right. Right. There's another way to do this, to say we put you on our platform and then people can, peers or the people can do. That's a separate lending mechanism. What type of ideas go to like these peer lending things? What type of ideas go to venture capitalists? Research shows they're somewhat different. And for now, in this study, I just want to focus on reaching the early stage growth venture capitalists, because the early stage growth venture capitalists are people with not only the money, but the connections and the screening they do and the network and the syndication they can get that might move you to a faster growth, to a higher growth. Right? So that's what we want to focus on in this paper, Haritha. And you're right, there are different ways to do this. So the first hypotheses were around ego and target proximate, and the second hypotheses were around what type of persuasion strategy do you use. You mentioned monetary incentives or you mentioned reciprocity. And then the hypotheses come in this flavor. Sorry, let me get it here. H2 is beyond giving just the facts, it's better to give reciprocity. Beyond just giving the facts, it's better to provide financial incentives. Okay. Obviously, I want to say, we are not comparing here which one is better, reciprocity or money, right? That we are not making, because we have to have a baseline, and against the baseline, we're comparing two different theoretical streams. Okay, it's a non-trivial point. So the first study, where you see the picture of the Golconda Fort that three of you picked out, was an incubator in Hyderabad. We had about 40 startups signed up, but in the day we went in, we did the study, there was an attrition, only about 18 showed up, and the sample size was small, and 14 teams stayed in the study. We ran, it was, as you know, 14 is too few to run a study, right? So we found we treated it as a pilot, we learned a lot, right? We said we needed a larger sample size, and then we said, okay, let's go to another incubator in India. And then we had an incubator in Bangalore. We signed up 90 people and we were all gung-ho and excited. We went down to conduct the study. On Saturday morning, when we were running the study, there was a downpour in Bangalore. So the entrepreneurs on these scooters and two-wheelers and other things, Bangalore's traffic is not the kindest, could not make, there was heavy attrition, right? So this is the Hyderabad incubator. The Bangalore incubator, we got about 20 entrepreneurs who selected 214 contacts and reached about the panel of 6 early stage investors. So we learned again, and we found similar results in study 1, study 2 in India, in Hyderabad and Bangalore. We said, look, let's make one more attempt at this, and let's make one more go at this, and to really able to be studied with sufficient sample size. So then we had to run the third field experiment. We finally got a set of 42 entrepreneurs signed up and in the study. These entrepreneurs listed 441 contacts. And the challenge they had when they signed up was that we listed a panel of investors and they should reach these investors. If they reach these investors successfully, the entrepreneur would get a time to pitch to the venture capitalists. Whether the venture capitalists will invest or not, it's a normal course of things, but at least they would get a fair hearing, a pitch, and then feedback, right? So this we labeled as the Find the Funder Challenge. And then we had 42 entrepreneurs and worked with the Startup Buddy, which is an online incubator site, to help us with this recruitment. The conditions were monetary incentives, reciprocity or baseline. And the entrepreneur contacts varied between the entrepreneur proximate or the investor proximate. How does this work? I have 15 minutes in time, so let me jump up slightly ahead. Right? Okay, let me go back. There is a panel of investors, right? 4 panel of mystery investors. The venture capital team, the entrepreneur can't cold call them, right? Can't send it directly, can't cold call them. Has to go through a network. And the network choices are left to the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur can list any people that they could send the message to get it to the investors. Right? This is the Find the Funder exercise. So it's a live, real, in-person exercise. Benefits: investors give 10 minutes virtual pitch. Because it was COVID, they couldn't do face-to-face. It was virtual pitches. Message: you cannot reach the panel members directly, and there was a time period window which they had to reach, right? Within which they had to reach.